A few episodes back when we reviewed the Fujifilm 23mm f1.4, we got so many comments coming in. This looks amazing. What camera did you shoot it on? And I had to keep quiet because the camera hadn't been announced yet, but now I can say that we shot that on the BS1H. So that's why the image quality looked so good. But also it's the same image quality as the Panasonic S1H that we generally use, so maybe it's because we brought a $30 reflector with us that day. Welcome back, DP Review TV viewers. It's Jordan Drake here, which means we're going to be talking about some video stuff today. And if you've been paying attention to the openings of our episodes, we show which camera we've shot the episode on, and a lot of those have been with the Panasonic S1H. I just love the image that comes out of that. I love the handling, but I understand a lot of people have a common complaint. It is a big body, it's extremely heavy, and it'd be great if we could get that kind of image quality in a smaller package. Well, Panasonic heard your cries, and they just launched the brand new BS1H. Now, a while back, Panasonic brought out their first BGH1 that had this box camera form factor. And this one, looking at it externally, looks exactly the same, which is actually really impressive because now we've got a full frame 24 megapixel sensor with their full frame L mount on it. There is one small difference though that I actually really like. They've moved all the custom buttons onto the left side of the camera front here, so it means you're not going to accidentally say look for a custom function and power the camera down. You've got your lens mount and the camera power on the opposite side. Stay away from those unless you need them. But now I want to talk about why you would get this camera over an S1H. Okay, so now we've switched over to recording on the BS1H, and you should notice a huge change in image quality. Well, no, really, it should look exactly the same as the S1H that we just used. You get all the same recording options with this, and the image should look exactly the same, which is a great thing. S1H is one of my favorite images that you can get from a camera. So if you're getting the same picture quality, why would you go with the BS1H over an S1H? Well, it really comes down a lot to the inputs and outputs on it, starting with the fact that we have a locking SDI connection on this. It's great, you're not going to accidentally pull out a cable, it's an industry standard. However, this camera is capable of recording ProRes RAW or B-RAW out to an external recorder. Unfortunately, it can only do that through the HDMI port, and the Blackmagic recorders do have SDI input. It would have been nice to see that go over the SDI, but RAW is going to be HDMI only on this camera. One of the biggest benefits of the BS1H is this does have Gen Lock on it. So this is going to be fantastic if you need to synchronize multiple cameras, especially if you're doing like 3D work or a big studio setup. This alone might be worth the price of admission. We also have a timecode connection. Now remember, you could also use the included cable that came with the S1H plugged into the sync port and gave you this same functionality, but honestly it's quite a bit more elegant just having it built right onto the body with the BS1H. The S1H and the BS1H both have USB-C inputs, and if it's a PD deliver system, then you can power the camera through that. But what the S1H lacks is an Ethernet port, and we do have that on the BS1H. If you have a PoE, power over Ethernet signal, then you can power the camera through Ethernet as well. But this is just a much more secure connection if you're planning to tether this camera. The other major changes are just physical. This is a much smaller, lighter body, and it's absolutely covered in 1/4-20 mounts, so it's easy to rig up, or if you want to mount it in an unconventional way, that's really nice. And it accepts the much larger Panasonic Pro Video batteries that are going to give you longer record time than the smaller batteries in the S1H. So the box camera version has some real advantages, but that's the case with the S1H that's filming me right now as well. We've got displays, that's the biggest thing for me. We've got an absolutely beautiful electronic viewfinder and a fully articulating screen with my favorite hinge design that's out there. As well, those are going to display more information. We get waveforms with the S1H. Weirdly, we're not going to see those with the BS1H. Now, Panasonic's reasoning is you're going to be hooking this into a monitor a lot of the time, but if you just plug it straight into a computer and monitor through there, you're not going to have waveforms for metering your scene, and it's a real pain in the ass. One of the biggest drawbacks to the BS1H is just the entire control interface, and that's a problem that the S1H doesn't have. S1H, you have a touch interface on it, which I think works really well, and Panasonic's video interface is really designed to be used with a touch screen. But on top of that, you've just got a pile of external controls on the S1H. You've got dedicated dials for all of your exposure controls, lots of custom buttons. It's just an easier camera to handle when you're actually out in the field. And that's not all, because the big beefy body of the S1H also has room for a very effective in-body image stabilization system. So if you're gonna be filming video handheld, makes an absolutely huge difference to your footage. As well, you know, the S1H isn't known as a great photo camera, but it's actually shockingly capable. I mean, it's really an S1 with a low pass filter. Unfortunately, if you go with the BS1H, it doesn't even have the option to take photos. So if you have some interest in photography, the S1H is a better choice there as well. So things are a little bit complicated if you're trying to decide between the S1H or the BS1H, but it should be really simple if you're looking at the BGH1, the original box camera with a micro four thirds sensor, right? It's like, if you have the money, you might as well go full frame. But the BGH1 does have some real advantages. For starters, it can shoot 4K 60 without any crop, where you're gonna have to go down to a Super 35 crop with both the S1H and the BS1H. Also, the readout speed is quite a bit faster. So if you're shooting things like live music or sports, where we're using a lot of these remote cameras, you're probably gonna be more worried about rolling shutter than low light performance. And again, the micro four thirds sensor might make more sense then. And also remember, a big part of the appeal of these box cameras in the first place is that they are very small and light, and a lot of those L-mount lens options are big, heavy pieces of glass to cover that full frame sensor, where there's just a ton of small, compact micro four thirds lens options. If you're looking for a smaller package, again, the BGH1 might make more sense in those situations, but image quality in general is still better with the full frame cameras. So you can certainly use the BS1H out in the field the way that we've got it here, but I think for the majority of shooters, it's going to be used in a studio, tethered into a computer, using the Lumix Tether software. So let's use the magic of video editing, go back to my basement and show you how that works.
Never go to Jordan's basement with the promise of magic.
That was quite a segue, Chris. So now I'm back home. I've got the BS1H tethered into my computer, and this is really where it's most comfortable. I'm using the Lumix Tether for multicam software, and that brings up actually one of the coolest things about both the BS1H or the BGH1 is they're going to allow you to run multiple cameras on one computer. It can actually support up to 12 cameras, but that's going to be very demanding. You're going to need a pretty hefty machine in order to do that. Unfortunately, right now, I've only got one camera, but I can still take a look at the software, and you can see here, it's actually very intuitive. Looks a lot like the app that you'll be using whenever you're using a Lumix camera in mobile. But on top of that, you can actually open up the entire camera's menu interface. Looks exactly like it does on camera, so this is going to be a very comfortable experience for anybody who's used to using a Lumix camera. Now, right now I'm previewing the camera's live view in its fine image quality mode, and it looks really nice. There is a little bit of lag though. You can see in the background there when I move my hand. Takes about a quarter of a second for it to follow, so it might be tricky for something like manual focus or a really sophisticated camera move, but in those cases you can drop the quality down. This is a very slick, easy to use interface, and I think it's probably the biggest selling feature of either of the box cameras. So is the BS1H the right camera for you? I really think that depends on how you're planning to use it. If it's gonna live in a studio tethered, then this is a better camera than the S1H. There it absolutely makes sense, but it's when you go out in the field that things are so much more challenging. Like having the hot shoe right beside the four-way jog dial that you're gonna use absolutely all the time to control this camera. Now, some of that is gonna be alleviated. Portkeys has already brought out a monitor that gives you touch control for this camera, but if you wanna shoot RAW, that's only available with Atomos and Blackmagic recorders, and they don't support the touch control right now. Even if you're occasionally taking this camera out in the field, don't forget you're gonna need a monitor, you're gonna need cables, you have to have a support because there's no in-body image stabilization on this camera. There, the S1H is definitely gonna be a better camera for you. But I really like this trend we're seeing where we've got the same sensor and performance being brought out into a few different body types, so you can really pick the one that works best for your kind of work. I like what Panasonic's doing here, and I do think that the BS1H is definitely gonna find a market. If you found this review useful, you should definitely subscribe. And you know, sometimes I'm hosting and Chris is filming, and then Chris is hosting and I'm filming, and we both need to know how we did, so you should let us know in the comments. And give us a like, because you gotta support this duo, and we will see you all again with some more DP Review TV very soon.